Obviously, my name is Mike.
I'm Kenny.
And it's kind of a unique situation that we're in college right now. At a college, we've never been to college. There'll be more about that later. We were both Jehovah's Witnesses growing up and for most of our adulthood as well. I'm 41 years old. I left the Jehovah's Witnesses officially when I was 38.
And I'm 38, and I left them at 35.
So about 2 years after we left, I started a podcast that you all listened to an episode of. That's my personal story, and I designed it and told it so that outsiders could maybe even understand what Jehovah's Witnesses are like. After I ended that podcast, I had so many people who were reaching out to me saying, please don't stop, we want to tell our stories too, that I started a second podcast called Shunned. That one is still ongoing, and now I help people from a lot of different groups to tell their stories, not just ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but Mennonite, Amish, pretty much anywhere shunning occurs. Recently, I actually even became a certified life coach. Just this month, I started my first life coaching sessions with a group of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's been a really cool thing to be able to kind of take a negative and make a positive out of it. Now, we know that this class isn't about cults, it's about social media and psychology, but cults are masters of propaganda and manipulating people. And so once we left the Witnesses, we got online on a lot of these social media sites, saw a lot of similar tactics used in the way a lot of things are portrayed. We actually recently had some friends who visited from Australia, and one of the things they mentioned to us was that the news here, they said it was a lot different than in Australia. In Australia, they said it was more a factual accounting of what happened, whereas here, it's more about an opinion, an agenda telling you how to think about what happened, not just what happened. Whether it's politics, sports, culture at large, the way products are marketed, things like that, social media is full of stories that kind of let you know up front, often in the headline, what they want you to take away. So, we've seen these manipulations used in different places. What we thought we'd go ahead and do is maybe kind of go through some of the propaganda and the manipulation that we went through as Jehovah's Witnesses, see how these things kind of work, how they play together, and then you'll probably be able to see how these things manifest themselves in your own lives or on social media or just the media in general. So when a young Jehovah's Witness is born, before they're even verbal, they're shown a lot of images. Little babies, their minds are pretty pliable, and not only might a young Jehovah's Witness child, there's always the cute, where's Jehovah? Jehovah being God's name, and the little baby points up, and everybody, oohs and ahs over that, and it's cute. But they're also being exposed to the same information that the adults are exposed to. And so there are a lot of images that they are exposed to which impact their minds. So what we're going to do is, there's a yellow book. It was entitled My Book of Bible Stories. Had red lettering on it. That's what we kind of grew up with. Really stood out. And in it, there were a lot of Bible stories that were handpicked along with artist-drawn illustrations, some of which we're going to see. And you have to remember, this is what they picked to go in the book. And these are the things that you, even as a young child, are exposed to as you are pre-verbal and then as you start to become verbal. But Jenny, my parents were 8 when they became Jehovah's Witnesses, so I wasn't really quite exposed to that book, but she was, and so are millions of other young Jehovah's Witnesses, so she's going to kind of explain a few things that happened in that.
Yeah, when I thought back to, there was one picture in particular that kind of I remembered from the My Book of Bible Stories. It was this picture of Jezebel. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Bible story. I just remember knowing, I knew she was a bad lady. I wasn't sure why, but I was so intrigued by the picture, the makeup and the scowl and those hands. I remembered it well. This book was given to toddlers to entertain them during the long meetings 3 times a week, and our parents would, give us our book and be like, quiet, be quiet, and look at your book. This picture is on the current website of Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's this woman here that you see. Her name is Jael, and she is showing a man something inside of a tent. And I remembered this picture, but I remembered there being a lot more to it. So I went and looked to see what the original was from my book of Bible stories when I was a little girl. And this was the picture that we saw. There's a man lying in a pile of blood with a tent peg pounded through his skull. Here are a few more examples. This one is random crimes from the days of Enoch. I guess we decided it was important to show this. People in distress, and more pools of blood. Here is Samson, who is killing an entire arena of people, including himself. We also have people and animals drowning in the flood, clinging to their last moments of life. And King Solomon ordering a baby to be chopped in half. One person I knew called this the scary yellow book. These drawings were obviously intended to get like an emotional reaction from you. They didn't choose to make this picture a picture of like a grateful woman being reunited with her baby, the real mother. They chose to make this picture a violent and scary thing, and that's what they chose over and over again on the pages of this book.
So you can see, they're pretty powerful images for a little kid to be looking at. So now you're this little kid. You've started learning a little bit more about the teachings through these meetings that you have to go to, just like the adults. From early on, you start accompanying your parents out in the field ministry, going door to door, which, of course, is what Jehovah's Witnesses are known for, waking you up on Saturday morning. So you're this little kid. You're going door to door. You might be given a little bit to say. Maybe you're just kind of used for your cuteness to hand out magazines or tracts or books or whatever, because what kind of monster is going to turn down a little kid offering them something for free? So you, as this child, humans have a need for internal consistency. Whatever we're doing on the outside, we must be doing that because we believe it. So as a kid, it's another way to kind of reinforce to you your beliefs, that you must really believe this thing because you're going out and helping your parents teach people these very things. So now you're at an age where you can read aloud, or at least memorize and repeat. That was for some of us. And you join something called the Theocratic Ministry School. And in this school, you're given little assignments like to read the Bible for 5 minutes, some passage, or maybe give a demonstration of something that might happen when you were out knocking on doors. So in these assignments, again, you're up in front of people, telling people what you believe. You're reinforcing these things in your own mind. You're studying at home every week as a family. You're going to, back in the day at least, it was 5 hours of meetings every week that we would go to on Tuesday for an hour, Thursday for 2 hours, Sunday for 2 hours. Then Saturday in the morning, we would go out and knock on doors for at least a couple hours. Then Sunday after the 2-hour meeting, we would go back out and knock on doors for a couple hours. So it becomes literally your entire life, and there's not any way to get away from it. So through these meetings, you start hearing threats about something called the Great Tribulation. So the Great Tribulation is always coming tomorrow. No matter how much time elapses, it's always tomorrow. So at some moment soon, God is going to put it into the hearts of the United Nations to turn against religion worldwide. So the United Nations are going to essentially ban all religion, but there's going to be one group who remains standing, and I'm sure you can guess who this would be. So Jehovah's Witnesses are going to keep doing their thing. And growing up, this is something that we were told from the time we were kids to prepare for. We were going to have to go out and maybe even warn people that their imminent doom was coming once the Great Tribulation started. We were given images of concentration camps because the Nazis did persecute Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses were included in that. Though unlike Jewish people could not be Jewish, Jehovah's Witnesses chose to do this and chose to go through, which shows how strong the indoctrination is, that so many would choose to go through and die for their beliefs. So we were always kind of this was held out as something that we were going to have to deal with when we got to that point. The world was going to hate Jehovah's Witnesses because they were the only people not complying with the ban. And now we get to Armageddon. So when the world turns its attention to Jehovah's Witnesses, it's said to be like touching the eyeball of God. So if I come up and I touch you in the eye, you're obviously going to react immediately. So the point being that Jehovah was going to immediately react and come to war against everybody on earth. Now, these images that we've shown, these concepts would be pretty terrifying for children. Recently, I was talking to a friend. He was raised a witness. His wife, or ex-wife, is a witness. He no longer is. That's why there's the ex part. And they share custody of a child. Well, they were out. My friend and his new wife were watching the sunset, and his child was kind of freaking out. Why would he freak out? Well, he's freaking out because the sky's kind of red. Like in a lot of the imagery, the sky is red. It's this fiery day of Jehovah's judgment. So, little kids are impacted by this. There are people who, even as adults, are scared of certain noises and things like that because there's a measure of PTSD that comes with being exposed to this stuff. But again, this great day, this war of Armageddon, is the deliverance for Jehovah's Witnesses. They believe that once it's over, they're going to walk right into an earth that is going to be turned into a paradise like the original Garden of Eden. They're going to have 1,000 years under Jesus Christ's reign. During this, they're going to work toward human perfection. They're going to become perfect in all aspects, mentally, emotionally, physically. Things like there won't be danger anymore, so they believe that they're going to play with lions and cobras because animals will be perfect, and apparently perfect animals are herbivores. If you think too hard about things like that, like all the animals only eating plants, if you think too hard about what it would take to take literally everything that is on earth today and transform this back into a Garden of Eden, a garden state where all the buildings were gone and everything. And then also, on top of that, they are to be teaching, so they believe that all the dead will come back to life on earth, and that they will help these ones basically become Jehovah's Witnesses. So they're going to teach them the truth. And so in 1,000 years, somehow they're going to become perfect. They're going to teach all these billions of people that come. They're going to wipe the earth clean and make it a garden. And obviously, this doesn't make a lot of sense if you start thinking about it critically. But this is where thought-stopping techniques are employed. So if we started questioning the logistics too much, it became just a matter of, well, don't you trust in Jehovah? So that just kind of shuts it down. The answer is because God. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about how it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. And who am I to doubt Jehovah? So this is something that witnesses do a lot. They stop themselves from thinking very deep about things. As I mentioned, they think that their loved ones are going to come back to the earth and be resurrected. So, I just alluded to the fact that, they're going to have a paradise on earth, which earth is something we can all relate to. Heaven, none of us have been there. We can't really relate to that as well, but the concept of an earth and a paradise, we can kind of relate to that. We've seen beautiful places on earth that we'd like to go. And now you're going to get everyone that you've ever loved. They're all going to come back. It's a pretty good sales pitch. But what they also don't say is, so to them, death is the wage of sin. So the wages of sin is death. So once you die, you've paid for your sins. And so if that's the case, then I guess in this new paradise, say hi to Hitler and Stalin and all these horrible people that would come back, because that's the way they believe. But if they start thinking about that, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound like a paradise. It doesn't sound like where they would want to be. So in the end, their greatest hope, this whole new earth, relies on watching billions of people on earth be slaughtered so that they can live in this paradise. That's what Armageddon is. God comes, wipes out everybody else so that Jehovah's Witnesses can have the earth to themselves. So that's pretty brutal, but it's not so brutal if you dehumanize the other side. So this is where an us versus them comes into play. So first, let's talk about labels. All of you, are called worldly. You're all worldly. Now, in common vernacular, worldly is a good term. You might be called worldly wise. Typically denotes a person who's got a lot of perspective, has had a lot of experiences in life. But to us, worldly just meant of this world. We were to not be of this world. You were of the world. You were worldly, and you were not one of us. So we weren't really supposed to be friends with worldly people. And that includes our relatives who were not Jehovah's Witnesses. We weren't really close to, I speak for both of us, we weren't really close to any of our aunts or uncles or grandparents or anybody because you weren't supposed to be. After all, an attachment to these people, honestly, we're just going to be killed in Armageddon. That could be a weak spot in your own faith. You don't want to see that. It would hurt you. So you're not really supposed to be close to these people. And then in any us versus them scenario, you need a threat. So them has to stand in the way of us in some way. For us, worldly people were, this is a quote from the Bible, bad associations that spoil useful habits. So you immoral and vile humans, everyone on the outside was kind of seen that way. You could possibly seduce us to do something against the rules. And if we did something against the rules, we might be shunned today and then killed at Armageddon, just like you. So we were to be different than you. We were to dress different than you, talk different than you, be entertained by different things than you. Because if Armageddon came today and the angels were going around destroying people, how would they know we were different? We need to stand out in some way. Because if we don't, then I guess that suddenly can erase everything we've done in our lives, because in that moment we didn't stand out. So all of this served to desensitize us to your plight. We didn't see people on the outside as people. Today, Jenny and I are the worst of the worst, though. We are apostates, referred to as mentally diseased apostates. You got to throw in the mentally diseased part in the quote above. Because they have to make us the worst of the worst because we woke up and left the group. We woke up and saw through it all, so they have to create a lot more fear even. Shunning is shunning, and it's to be complete. But just in case you had a family member that might kind of break the shunning code and want to talk to you in some way, they have to make us even worse because we are dangerous. We are Satan's mouthpiece. We are evil. We are shunned. But the fact that we speak out about things like the pedophilia problem in the organization, the thousands of people that die for refusing blood transfusions, the impact that doctrines like this have on people, and just there's a lot of negative things that come along with it. The absolute destruction of families through shunning. So because we speak out about these things, we are awful. In fact, as you can see from the answer to the question posed in the quote on the slide, we are not living today among theocratic nations where such members of our fleshly family relationship could be exterminated for apostasy, as was possible and ordered in the nation of Israel. So in the days of Israel, they would just stone you, for believing different or thinking different or for a sin. So the words could and was possible kind of shows that, honestly, they almost wish they could. They wish they could eradicate us. We're not really people to them anymore. And it's a shame. So you've been around Jehovah's Witnesses. You know the doctrine. Maybe you're still a kid, but you kind of know right and wrong from their narrative. When you're a baby, according to them, you're protected by the spirituality or the spiritual standing of your parents. In other words, when Jehovah kills everyone at Armageddon, he won't kill you like the other babies because your parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. But there's a point in time where what's called the age of accountability comes into play. And there is no specific age, which might make it a little bit more nefarious. It's not like, at 18, by 18, you have to make a decision you're either in or out. They can use this against you at any time. Anytime that usually your parents, feel that you know right from wrong and you know the doctrine, then it's time to make a stand. And if you don't make this stand, then you're no longer safe under the spirituality of your parents. So you're at risk. So that's when you get baptized. baptized. And that when you get baptized is when it all becomes very real. Lots of people get baptized as kids. I was 14, Jenny was 15, but they have kids baptized as young as 7. These are people who are probably playing with toys to some degree. But regardless, when you get baptized, you're making essentially an infinite long contract with the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses that this is what you will do. And in order to get baptized, you have to go through a series of questions, show that you understand the doctrine, that you can, if nothing else, read the material and regurgitate it. And then you're qualified to get dunked in water. Once you come out of that water as a baptized person, you are now one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and now the threat of shunning applies to you too. So for Jenny and I, we spent decades trying to live up to that dedication. No matter how awful our life experience was, no matter how much hypocrisy we saw, no matter how much we hurt from living that life. I talked about my own suicidal ideations and stuff in the podcast, This JW Life. We were the best Jehovah's Witnesses that we could be, but it was never enough. It's a performance-driven organization, and they always want you to do more, give more, be more. And they don't give anything back. So there's a lot of pressure on you to keep up with the other witnesses around you. In fact, there's pressure to stand out among them as more righteous. So because of that, everyone is watching everybody else. If somebody else slips up, you are to report them to the elders. And so if you don't, if they've committed especially as what would be termed a serious sin, then you are viewed as being complicit in their sin because you didn't report on them. Along with that comes something that I've heard referred to outside of the witnesses, Jesus juking. Kind of one-upping each other by trying to be more spiritual and more righteous, appear a certain way. You went out and knocked on doors for 10 hours this month, and yes, we did have reports that we had to fill out and turn in every month of how many hours we went out knocking on doors or just talked to people in a group or whatever, and how many magazines we left with people, things like that. So if you went out and knocked on doors for 10 hours this month, I did 11. You wear a skirt that goes down to your ankles. Well, this person says, well, mine will go to my ankles, and then I'll wear a turtleneck with it. It's everybody is trying, in a world where everybody is the same, you have to try to be different in the only way that you can. And the only way that you can is by trying to one-up the other person. It's the only safe way that you can. It gets super petty and causes a lot of gossip in the congregations and things like that. Kind of reminds you of what you might call virtue signaling today, trying to show that you feel a certain way, you think a certain way, that you're not quite the same, as, especially in contrast with some other people. So, if you've listened to that episode of the podcast, you've heard a couple different models for cults. But, I don't know, I was also thinking about the book 1984. Has anybody read that? Is that something that most people have read? Okay. I read it after we left the cult. It was absolutely mind-blowing to me because it was almost like a playbook for our lives. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through the book a little bit and show you some similarities. It's obviously about propaganda, how humans can be controlled. If you listen to the episode on my podcast, I talked about the fog, fear, obligation, and guilt. That's one model by which you can control people. The other is the bite model. If you can control their behavior, their access to information, their thoughts, and their emotions, then you can get people to do what you want. So on to 1984, one of the things that you have in the book are the thought police. Winston Smith, the main character, has to hide his true feelings lest he be found out and vaporized as an unperson. So the same happens in the cult. If you're found out to have doubts and you don't get in line, then you are disfellowshipped and shunned as one of those vile apostates that I mentioned earlier, simply because you no longer believe. And again, yes, people do turn each other in for this stuff. My wife, Jenny, honestly, she should have turned me in. I was the one who woke up first. I had the doubts first. And I couldn't sit at the meetings and listen to some of the things that were said and keep it down. I had to speak out about it. And so, a lot of the car rides home, I was, openly questioning things. And so she didn't agree with me entirely, but she trusted me enough and knew that I wouldn't have brought it up if there wasn't something going on. So eventually she came around. She had her own questions as well. We all did. We all had our own questions. We all saw things that didn't add up, but you just don't talk about it. So once I finally did start talking about it, she could feel comfortable doing the same. Had she turned me in, I would have been shunned, and I'm sure we wouldn't be married today, because that's just, it destroys marriage. It just absolutely destroys people's lives. In the book, these thought criminals were hanged publicly. So those that are cast out of the cult, in the same way, we were publicly announced as no longer being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. They announced this from the platform at their meetings so that everyone knows to begin shunning you. Character assassination is an effective way of shutting up your critics. Just smear the person, cut them off at the knees. You don't have to listen to them. You don't have to think about the uncomfortable things they might say. Just get rid of them. Another aspect of the book was newspeak. Newspeak was the destruction of language. So there was no good or bad. It was good or ungood. There was plus good and double plus good for great or excellent. So the beauty of language was systematically being stripped. And I talked earlier about how they use the word worldly to mean something other than how it's commonly used. They're also constantly changing things, like our conventions in the summer used to be called district conventions. Now they're called regional conventions. The elder in the congregation, who was kind of the head of all the elders, he was called the presiding overseer. Now he's called the coordinator of body of elders. And all this stuff seems minuscule, but they're constantly changing the verbiage. It's a way to prove your loyalty, that you're there all the time, that you can keep up with the words. It was the same in the book with Newspeak. Winston Smith was asked many times, or they would talk about Newspeak, and are you keeping up? If you can't keep up, then something must be wrong with you. Maybe you really side with the other side. Maybe you're not really with us. And also, when you change language or when you control language, what we say is an expression of our thoughts. And so you're really kind of controlling people's thoughts by controlling the words they can use. So in the book, there was the ministry of truth. Now, the ministry of truth was the one source that you were to go to for your information. Jehovah's Witnesses, we literally refer to our religion as the truth. So it'd be like, when'd you come into the truth? Who taught you the truth? Where'd you learn the truth? They also have their own website, jw.org. They have their own Bible. They have their own publications to study. They have their own videos. They even have their own cartoons now. For years, they were against us going online. The internet was this evil, dangerous place. But now, of course, that they have their own little media empire online, the internet's great, but of course, you must go only to the ministry of truth. You must go to this one place to get your information. And in that ministry of truth, where Winston worked, there was the memory hole, where when certain things were changed, he would take that news and send it down, and it would be in the memory hole, and it would be incinerated. It didn't exist anymore. Jehovah's Witnesses have a term for that. It's called new light. So what you believed yesterday is subject to change today. If the men who lead the religion decide that something needs to change, often it's because they've made some prediction about the end of the world. They've predicted the end of the world many times throughout their history, and we're all still here. So new light will come out, and suddenly they have to work around those doctrines to try to make it fit what they also call present truth, which is just another term to say, well, yeah, this is how it actually is. But anyway, if they can't do that, then what they do is if something doesn't go their way, they just blame the individuals. They blame the victims and say, well, you all took it wrong, or, we didn't really say that. You all just took something and ran with it. In the book, there's also the ministry of love. The ministry of love is where you were tortured, where they were going to reprogram or help you. Similarly, Jehovah's Witnesses say that shunning and disfellowshipping people and cutting them off from their family, that's a loving act. So you go to the modern day ministry of love, the elders in the congregation, because of some sin that you've committed. In order to help you, there are different ways they can help you. They could just offer you some counsel depending on the severity of what you've done. If you're called into a judicial meeting, and yes, they have their own judicial system internally, you sit in front of 3 elders, 3 men, it's always men, of course. And you sit in front of these 3 men and you talk to them about what it was you did. If it wasn't very severe, you can be marked in the congregation, and they'll kind of give a talk in the congregation about a thing that you did that apparently people kind of know about, but it's not super severe, so everybody just kind of knows, like, don't shun them. You can talk to them maybe at the Kingdom Hall, at the meetings, but don't talk to them outside very much. If what you did was a serious sin, but you're sorry that you did it, you're truly repentant, you go in there and you beg for forgiveness, then you are reproved. And what being reproved is basically they may go up on stage and say, brother or sister so-and-so has been reproved in the congregation. Nobody knows what you did, but they know you did something, and at least you were sorry for it, but then maybe you can't raise your hand and comment at the meetings, you can't go knock on doors, you can't give talks. There are ways that people will start seeing that you're not interacting anymore. And then if they deem you unrepentant, which is up to the whims of the 3 men, it's up to them, their predilections, their preconceived notions of who you are or what you did. Then they will tell you right then and there that you're going to be disfellowshipped. And once you're disfellowshipped, you're announced from the congregation that brother and sister so-and-so are no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're dead. That's it. You don't exist. That label sticks with you forever. So you can go on and change your life course. If there was a behavior that got you kicked out and shunned, you can change that behavior. You can change your life. But unless you come back to them, you are disfellowshipped forever. So it's not about what you do. It's about whether or not you come back. And so it's a control mechanism. So some people like us, we were not disfellowshipped. We chose to disassociate. What a lot of people do, if their eyes have been opened and they don't want to be witnesses anymore, they do what's called fading. So ghosting, that's a term that people know. So they kind of ghost the organization. So you stop going to meetings, you just kind of fade away. You hope nobody pays attention, everybody just leaves you alone, and you can go live your life, however you want. In order to do that, some people move across country so that they can move where nobody knows them. They still have their family maybe back home. They can still talk to them on some level, but now they have this distance between them, this physical distance. It involves a lot of game playing. You're not going to be able to post on Facebook that you celebrated Christmas or that somebody celebrated your birthday. They don't celebrate holidays. You're going to have to keep what you're doing to yourself if it's anything that they could see as being a sin. So in order to fade, you have to play a lot of games. I've never been great. I don't like games, but it's just the way I'm wired. And so we weren't, we had talked about what we were going to do. We faded the best we could. Didn't work super well. Eventually, the elders started calling us on the phone. When we didn't return their phone calls, they started stalking us at our house. Didn't answer the door. We knew then that it wasn't going to go away. And so we had made a pact that when they started doing this stuff, we were just going to be done with it. So disassociation is sitting down, writing a letter, and basically saying, I no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You mail that into them, certified, so that you know they got it, and then they announce from the platform that you're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and the shouting starts. It's not an easy decision to make. You're absolutely putting a bullet in this. It's dead. There's no coming back from this. But At the same time, we kind of felt like we took a step when we joined the organization, so we took a step on our way out. We took a stand on our way out. In the book, it wasn't enough just to obey Big Brother. You had to love Big Brother. So many people inside the cult try to love Jehovah God, but you're shown pictures of all this violence from the Old Testament. You know that your greatest hope is this massive act of violence where everyone's going to be exterminated. It's kind of, you're told that God is love, but then you're shown all this other stuff, and it causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, and it's difficult to reconcile those things. So a lot of people have a hard time connecting to and loving Jehovah. If you remember in the book, there were some slogans. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Those things are all opposites of one another, and they cause a lot of dissonance. You can't hold both of those things at the same time. Ultimately, this group, this cult, tries to force you to make 2 + 2 = 5. If you don't, you have to suffer the consequences. It causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of depression, a lot of suicides, things like that. And so, for us, we couldn't make that math work out anymore. We had to get out. I was going to talk about Room 101, but not everybody's read the book. I'm not going to spoil that. So when you live in an isolated place like this, it's been your entire worldview. It's everything you've known. It's the way you see life. You can't talk openly about it. So you really kind of need to get validation from somewhere. So there was a point in time where I decided to see a therapist. I went one time to just one session. I needed to hear one thing. I needed to hear that I was okay. Because literally everyone around me would have thought that I was not okay. But I went and saw someone that we know, a therapist, to typically be a fairly healthy person, and emotionally, mentally, hopefully, anyway, if they're a good therapist. And so I just needed to hear that I wasn't crazy as I started to see the realities around me. We all just want to be seen, mirrored, understood as people, and because there's such a climate of being quiet within the organization, because it's so dangerous to talk, they kind of keep you from that. You can't get that from anybody. So not long after that, I took the next step, and I went online and started seeing what these evil apostates were saying. So I remember I told her, I was like, I'm going to go on this website, and it's ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and I know that. This is a big deal, and I can't unsee whatever I go and see here. Are you okay with that? Because we tried to kind of tried to respect each other's pace of waking up. And so I went, and I quickly realized that these people just saw the same things I did. It was instant validation. These people all saw what they call the truth about the truth. They all saw that. So, as I mentioned earlier, when we came out of this world, this cult, one of the things that we were disappointed in was that we saw some similar manipulative behavior on the outside. But what we've come to kind of just accept and realize is that it's just kind of a human thing. I mean, humans are tribal in nature. You also have really damaged people who are narcissistic, and they typically attract very codependent people who are drawn to their intellect, or a lot of times they're very charismatic, or whatever it may be. And it's just a very human thing. A lot of people say that social media is a curse, that it's just this awful thing for humanity. We've kind of come to see it as two things. One, it's a reflection of humanity, not necessarily the cause. And two, as part of that reflection, it kind of shows how complex we are. Next time you see something awful said on Facebook, go look at the person who said it. Go look at their profile if they're not just a troll and actually are a real human being behind that you can go see. Go look at their profile. It might be a mom or a dad. They're somebody's kid. They probably have people that love them. They love other people. It's easy to demonize people, but we are all just, in the end, we're just people. Even the people that would demonize us today, Jehovah's Witnesses, even these people that would speak badly of us or look at us a certain way or would shun us to our faces, they're just people. They're cult victims. We were cult victims, and we're not anymore. But, so in the end, it would be easy for us to sit back and judge those people, but they're doing a lot of the same things we did. So it's kind of hard to judge them. It's just all we knew. I shunned my own brother for many years. I didn't know any better. That's how I was taught. That's how I thought that was helping him. I thought that was going to bring him back. And years later, I reached out to him and apologized and redeveloped that relationship with him. And of course, he understood too, because he had been there. So once you've been there, you kind of see things a little bit differently. When we left the cult, it was social media that kind of helped us to get free from the indoctrination through various XJW groups. It was social media that helped us reunite with people that we hadn't seen for decades. There were people that had been shunned for decades, my brother being one of them that I got to reconnect with. I can share my podcasts, on groups like this and find people who need help. I can advertise support groups or coaching that I'm doing and find people that need help. I have a Facebook group with over 300 members, people that need support, they're hurting, and they're looking for something, and social media provides that place where we can have these conversations. So, yes, social media can be a place for harm. So I'm not going to sit here and say like it's all rainbows and unicorns because we found some good in it. Obviously, again, there's kind of a yin and a yang. There's a few things in life are all good or all bad. And if you'll remember, when we kind of kicked off this whole conversation, I said something about how we'd never been to college. I excelled in high school. Went to Butler locally. Any Bears here? No? Fine. I graduated as a salutatorian. I did really well. I took honors classes for everything. My counselor was trying to get me actually to go to speed school here at U of L. But I wasn't having it because I had been told my whole life that anything beyond a basic education was a waste, that it was a threat to my spirituality, that it was a threat to my potential of having everlasting life. There's a phrase I heard recently, dream small or not at all. It kind of fits the bill. It was a very minimum life that they wanted us to have. They wanted us to give everything above the minimum to them and to their efforts. Now, I ended up using my youth to go out and spend 90 hours knocking on doors, all at my own expense, working many part-time jobs to string that together and make it happen. So I turned down any college opportunities that came my way. My wife had her own experience too. It kind of mirrors maybe what kind of goes on in the cult a little bit more now. They're getting more and more isolated and going to homeschooling a lot more. So I'll let her share her story.
My mom was really into the teaching that school was a waste of time. She really just did not value education at all. I missed tons of days through elementary school, through middle school, and in high school I was homeschooled. Everybody in my congregation was like, "You're not going to get this done." And I was like, "I am going to." I was so determined, but I was the only one that cared. I tried so hard to stay motivated and focused, and I really wanted to finish the program that I was in for my homeschooling. But my mom would come in and interrupt me while I was working on my schoolwork, and she'd be like, "Let's go shopping. You need a break." And I didn't make it. I didn't get it done. But I did spend lots of time knocking on doors, and that is something that they consider educational. When I got married to Mike, he and I worked on my studies, and I tried to get up to speed, and I went and took my GED test. I passed it quite easily, and I was so proud of myself. I called my mom, and I didn't expect a graduation party, but it would have been nice if she had said she was proud of me. But she just didn't care because it's not something she valued.
So we weren't really supposed to invest our time, our energy, our minds into this wicked world. This world is passing away. Why would you invest money into the Titanic? They would say things like that. We were to get the minimum education needed so that we could have these minimum lives like I talked about. Could you imagine someone from that closed environment going to college and maybe taking a philosophy class, what that would have opened up to them? But of course, we weren't to have that. So since we're in an academic institution, an institution of learning, and you're going to see in a minute why I said it that way, I thought a good way to send this out would be to give you all a little taste of the propaganda, a little test to see if you can spot some of the ways that these things are used against people. The man you're going to hear in the video, he's one of 8 men that direct 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. He's one of the governing body. His name is Anthony Morris, and this is taken from the January 2015 JW broadcast. This is something they put publicly online for consumption. I had to cut this down a little bit for time. After we watch it, have a few closing words, and then hopefully we can have a good discussion. But we'll see what you all think about this.
Ask yourself, why am I considering additional education? Is it because I'm pursuing a specific skill or trade to support my service to Jehovah? Or have I been pressured by the system into believing that higher education will somehow make me a more respected person or lead me to a better life? Let me review the scriptural basis for our previous published concerns about higher education. As an example, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad associations spoil useful habits. While it is true that the ancient city of Corinth was known for its immoral lifestyle, what was the Apostle Paul primarily concerned about when he penned those words? In verse 12 of the same chapter, he made clear that his comment about bad associations had to do with what the other persons believed. It was a doctrinal issue. If we are in continued association with those who do not believe the same, it can erode our thinking and convictions. Some have felt that spending time with non-believers in a university setting is no different than working secularly with those who do not share our beliefs. And in fact, bad associations in the workplace can be a real danger. However, it is one thing to work on a job with others and quite another matter to immerse oneself in an institution of learning. In Romans 12:2, Paul said to stop being molded by this system of things, but be transformed by making your mind over. We are to be careful that this system does not mold or shape our thinking. The verse said to make over your minds, not hand over your minds. Higher learning can easily influence thinking and attitudes. Elders in congregations that are in close proximity to universities are well aware of the repeated scenario of parents coming to the Kingdom Hall with a child that they're dropping off to attend the nearby university. Sadly, often in a few weeks or months, the child begins missing meetings. Not too long into the school year, he totally disappears. Then the parents are upset with the local body of elders for not shepherding their child. My question is, who dropped them off at the university? So where does the responsibility really lie? When we make a decision, we must realistically also accept the consequences. I have long said, the better the university, the greater the danger. The most intelligent and eloquent professors will be trying to reshape the thinking of your child, and their influence can be tremendous. One mom, I recall, asked me to try and help her son who was attending a prestigious named university in Rhode Island. After visiting him, I later had to inform her that her son now believed in evolution. She refused to believe it, and he finally told her himself. How sad. In Romans chapter 14, it counsels us not to judge or become overly critical of the decisions of others. As we mentioned earlier, ultimately the parents must decide how much education a child needs to succeed in life. But does that mean that any decision a parent makes regarding a child's education is fine with Jehovah? Follow along with the reasoning in Romans chapter 14, verses 10 through 12. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you also look down on your brother? Here's a valid point. For he will stand before the judgment seat of God. For it is written, as surely as I live, says Jehovah, to me every knee will bend, and every tongue will make open acknowledgement to God. Here Jehovah guarantees that one day, every person on earth will be a true worshiper of him. Will you be there? Will your son or daughter be among those alive at that time? Do your personal decisions matter? Yes. Look at verse 12. So then, each of us will render an account for himself to God. Yes, we all will have to answer to Jehovah for the decisions we make today. May we all decide to play it safe before our God. Think of all the opportunities there are now to enjoy divine education, congregation meetings, family worship, assemblies and conventions, the jw.org website, and the station you're watching right now. But in addition to all of that, the curriculum for the Pioneer Service School has been revised and is getting superb reviews by those attending. Then there's the new curriculum for the School for Kingdom Evangelizers that bolsters and trains students for a career in a variety of theocratic privileges. In addition to promoting divine education, what secular skills will we be promoting? Skills that will be useful to God's organization now and after Armageddon. For example, we need construction skills around the world right now. And think about this. We will not need doctors or lawyers after Armageddon, but we will need carpenters and plumbers and similar construction trades. It requires faith to decline higher education and have the confidence that our material needs will be cared for by training in other fields of employment.
Sorry to subject you all to that. I'm sure that was great. With that said, all the preceding said, I thought I'd put up one final slide. This is just kind of a list of some of the mechanisms that we've talked about today, some of the things that were used against us. There are things that we see at times used on social media and things like that. They're used to psychologically exploit people. I'm not here to tell anybody how to think or anything like that. Not start my own cult. But these are some things that are used a lot and that were used on us. So if you want to go ahead and have just a discussion, anybody feel free to ask whatever you want. Our lives are open books. Mine's on a podcast, so whatever anybody wants.
Can I ask you what it's like being a woman in the Jehovah's Witness congregation?
Yeah, I kind of figured that question was going to come up. Yeah, the men are in charge. They follow the headship arrangement. The Bible lays out, which is that the women answer to the man, and the man answers to Christ. Women are not allowed to hold responsibilities. As a kid, I remember, I would see the boys in my congregation would be able to do certain things. They would get to help hand out magazines or help with microphones on the stage, and I never got to do any of that. I really wanted to, but it was just never going to happen for me because I wasn't a boy. And also, the only thing that was open to me was to go out in the full-time ministry, which is 90 hours a month, which he did. And I came from a highly unmotivated family, so I never did it. But and believe me, it wasn't good. But that's what my life looked like. The prospects for my life were to marry a good man who could get me to be maybe an elder's wife. That would have been cool.
I never became an elder.
No, I think they kind of would have liked it, but he was like, yeah. So and if I could dedicate 90 hours, then I got to have the title of full-time pioneer, and that that made me special. But that's really the end of the specialness for a woman.
So would you guys identify with any faith now?
No, we're atheists.
Yeah.
At this point, doesn't mean that we can't say conclusively that there is no God. So I'm not saying that, but we don't believe that there's evidence for that. That's where we stand today. Far cry from where we used to be.
Yeah. When you were in high school or like any kind of school, would people like your classmates say stuff like, that's weird, like why are you doing that? And you were just supposed to like push it down essentially and like pretend.
Yeah, I mean, just you think about your whole school career. So one of the things Jehovah's Witnesses don't do, we weren't allowed to salute the flag or stand for the anthem and things like that. So because all allegiance goes to God and God alone. And so, you think about every day you're different. Each morning when you go to school, you're different. You stand out because you have to go outside the class while everybody does this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, when you came back from Christmas break and everybody was talking about the Christmas presents they got or where they went, I didn't have any stories. We didn't have anything to say. So, yeah, it was, it's a pretty brutal upbringing, honestly, for kids in school. Through me helping other people to tell their stories as well, I hear the stories. And, I mean, kids get beat up for their differences and bullied, and yeah, it's pretty rough. You're definitely different, and what kid wants to be different? All kids are trying to fit in, especially when you're a teenager and you don't fit in with anybody.
What's the reason behind why Jehovah's Witnesses can't receive blood transfusions?
Scripture, I think there's 2 verses, but we'll go with the one in Acts that where basically Paul in Acts 15, 28, 29, I think. So he's mitigating an issue between the Jews of the time and the Gentiles, and they're trying to get along. And he's basically saying, look, like, you all just don't do this, you don't do that, so you quit upsetting each other. One of the things that he said to do was to abstain from blood and from things sacrificed to idols. And so they take that verse that says abstain from blood. They used to look at it as eating blood, but they see transfusing blood as eating blood. I mean, at one point they saw organ transplants as cannibalism. So, they've at least come a long way from that.
Yay, science!
Yeah, they'll use science sometimes if it fits them. But, yeah, so they see blood is sacred. To them, blood is the symbol of life that God gave us. It like symbolizes our life. But if you think about that, what that means is they've put the symbol of life above life. If you refuse a blood transfusion and you die, they've put the symbol above the actual thing. So it makes no sense. But it's basically just a mischaracterization of some verses. They picked a thing. Cults often pick things to be different. They want to differentiate themselves from the other brands. And that is one thing that they picked up on early, and now they can't change. They do now allow blood fractions, so you can, and they have all these rules as to what that is, and I don't even know that I could go into it all, but you can take certain blood fractions.
They'll just change it anyway.
Yeah, they may, but so that's kind of them being easier on people. That's about as far as I can go, though, because if you think about it, how many people have died from refusing to take blood transfusions? Especially how many pregnant women die in childbirth because they can't take blood. It happens all the time. Think of the lawsuits they would face if tomorrow they suddenly said, you know what, blood's okay. We got new light. We can take blood transfusions now. Cause a problem.
So I guess I have another question then. Does the church sue the physician if the physician gives a Jehovah's Witness a blood transfusion?
We have a future doctor here.
So
Seriously,
I'm going to
seriously.
medical school,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I.
Yeah.
Well, you won't be needing that for Armageddon.
Well, I wrote that down actually. Then you doctors. All right.
So they don't. Yes, the organization will not sue, but there are individuals who sue. So they're not going to sue you for not giving blood because that would go against what they stand for. But they're going to find something probably to be mad at you about, and they're going to try to claim that you were negligent in some way, and that is why you did not save them. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So, whenever I was like 5, I had a neighbor who was Jehovah's Witness, and I noticed like a lot of times, like I would like talk to her like through the fence, but like whenever like the mom came out or whatever, she'd be like, get inside. So I noticed like whenever during your presentation that how you're not supposed to be close with people who aren't Jehovah's Witness, but can you be friends at all or no? Because that seemed like really extreme, like that situation, like don't talk to her at all.
So here's the deal. You're not going to be shunned for being friends with someone who's worldly. They can't take it that far. They don't have what they would feel would be biblical precedent to make that ruling. It's a lot of discouragement from having friends who are on the outside. So, I mean, like when I went to school, I had friends, I guess you would say. I mean, I talked to kids at school, and we sat together at lunch and stuff like that. But I knew I could never do anything outside with them. You know, I could never do any extracurricular activities at school. That was out. I mean, there are people who do. You know, I don't want to paint. There are exceptions to every rule. It does happen. But it's not normal. You're not really supposed to be friends.
I was actually, I grew up in a congregation where there were no other kids. I was like the only kid. And so I was allowed to play with the boy who lived across the street. He would come over all the time, and I played with him. But like, there's also these like unwritten rules. You know, you don't talk about it to anybody who is at your congregation. And like, as soon as there were people in my congregation that I could be friends with, like I was supposed to immediately know to just distance myself from this kid who we'd been friends growing up. He taught me to ride my bike, you know. And we're Facebook friends now. It's fine.
I'm starting to get sad.
But you know, so even though like there's no written rules about any of this, but you just kind of know what you're supposed to do.
The culture of the cult is often worse than some of the doctrine. It's the culture that develops around it that is kind of sometimes the most dangerous thing. Any other questions?
What is dating like any different?
Yeah. Yeah. So today you're to have a chaperone at all times. I don't care if you're 50 years old. You have a chaperone at all times, and that chaperone must be someone of reasoning age. You can't take your little sister and like tell her to go away. So someone is to pretty much always be around. They encourage a lot of things to be done in groups. You can marry. Dating is only for marriage. It is not to. It's not to have fun. Certainly not for sexual experimentation of any sort. You are to be virgins when you get married. You marry someone who's only in the Lord, is one of Jehovah's Witnesses. You're not really supposed to marry outside. You can get shunned for that. Again, it kind of just depends on the situation. Most Jehovah's Witnesses get married very young. I was 22, and she was 19, and 22 was getting old.
Yeah. I was getting nervous.
Yeah. A lot of people literally almost like the second they turn 18, they get married. It's
lots of them before.
Yeah, that's true. It's the only way to express any sexual urges is to get married, and they actually even see that. So it's kind of a wink and a nod given to that. It's like, well, like if you're so weak as to want to experience that in your life at some point, then yeah, I guess you could get married. You know, it's like singleness is encouraged because if you're single, then you can do more for them. You can do more for the Lord. You can do more for the organization. So singleness is encouraged. It doesn't mean marriage is discouraged, but singleness is expressly encouraged. And it's a very closed community when it comes to dating and things like that. A lot of people get married, like I said, very young, and they have a high divorce rate. Anecdotally, there are no statistics. No one's going to do that. They're not going to open themselves up to that. But I mean, anecdotally, in our lives, divorce is super high because it's super stressful, and people are just getting married a lot of times to have sex.
Did you find then, I assume were you from the same congregation or different congregation?
Different.
So then, is there differences between congregational teachings, or is it like one head of Jehovah's and it's all the same?
There are there's, like I said, there's 8.5 million witnesses all around the world in like 240 countries, something like that. And they all are taught the exact same thing. Literally, there's a schedule for like what is to be discussed at each meeting, and everyone has that in their language, and everybody does the same thing all the time.
Same opening song, same article in the same watchtower that says the same thing. Yeah.
So if you said there's like over 8 million,
Mhm.
then what's this whole like 100, 400?
Okay, 144,000.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I told you about Armageddon happens. Everybody's going to live in a paradise earth. It's going to be like the Garden of Eden. They do believe that there's a heavenly class, that there are 144,000 people, taken from a scripture in Revelation, that have the hope of living in heaven as kings and priests over the earth. So they will go to heaven. They will rule with Jesus Christ over the earth for that 1,000 years, and they will be kings and priests. Now, how do they know that they're a member of the 144,000? God's Spirit speaks to theirs. They just know. For years, so you all go to church sometimes, and there's like the wine and the bread, okay? So Jehovah's Witnesses do that once a year. It's coming up. It's the memorial of Jesus Christ's death. It's only done once a year on a specific Jewish calendar. And only those who are of the 144,000 who think that they're going to heaven can partake of the bread or wine. Everyone else is just to pass it and observe it. Most congregations have no one. I've never been in a congregation with a person who partook of the blood and wine. Everyone else just sits there. We just sit there, and there's a talk given, and you pass the stuff around, but nobody partakes.
Not even elders?
No, you have to be one of the 144,000. And so for years, so they counted how many people partook worldwide. And over the years, so when I was a kid, it was like 12,000. So this was used to show that the world was going to end soon, okay? There was 144,000, there's 12,000 left. The number kept going down, all right? The number got to, 7,000, let's say. And now the number has gone up. And so now it's back up to about 12 or 14,000. And so now they're giving talks saying that, sometimes people partake and it could be mental illness. Yeah, because the number's going the wrong way. They thought they had proof that the world was going to end, and now it's going the other way. So new light is that perhaps there's some mental illness involved in some of the people partaking. So that those 144,000 will go to heaven.
In the podcast that we listened to the episode, I remember that there was like discussion that Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the cross or something, and I was wondering if you could just explain that, because that seems kind of like different from other Christian denominations.
Again, it's good to be different, right? To differentiate your brand sometimes. They take the word stauros that is used, I think it's stauros, I'm kind of winging this, and it meant an upright stake or pole, I think. And so they see it as a stake and not with a cross member. So they see him, I guess, hands over the head, feet up, but both on the stake, the little platform for feet, and nothing, no arms outstretched. That's how they portray it, and so all these little things that differentiate them, and just the use of the term Jehovah. So if I come to your door, one of the first things I'm going to try to get you to see is Psalms 83:18, and a lot of translations that aren't the ones the witnesses use still has the name Jehovah in it. It wasn't edited out in translation for some reason. And so I get you to see that, look, God has a name, it's Jehovah. You're like, ooh, he showed me something new. Maybe he knows something. So then I take you and I show you that the word for cross was stauros, and I build this story, this narrative about it being a stake. Oh, wow, look, these people must know what they're talking about. They've got something different. And we'll also let you know that your religions were probably hiding it from you. So now you feel like I'm telling you the truth.
Why don't Jehovah's Witnesses celebrate holidays?
A lot of them have pagan origins,
Oh, okay.
so that's a reason. Of course, so do neckties,
Hmm.
but they all wear ties. So do wedding bands. So do a lot of things have pagan origins. If you really start wind chimes, things like that. And
Pagan
so
started a lot of things. So.
yeah. So that's why it's the pagan origins, or it's like Mother's Day or Father's Day would be like glory only goes to God. Same with like birthdays. So you don't want to heap any unnecessary glory upon your. God forbid you feel good about yourself. That's basically what they're saying, is never feel good about yourself.
Oh.
And do I have something to do with like the John the Baptist's murder or something like that? How it was during a birthday party, so that's why they don't celebrate birthday.
Okay, so with birthdays, yes, that is also a reason. So they have many reasons, but there are 2 birthdays in the Bible, and one was John the Baptist, the other one was Nebuchadnezzar maybe, or Herod, I don't know. And both birthdays in the Bible, a righteous man is beheaded. And so they say then, therefore, they extrapolate that to say, well then, apparently God's not encouraging birthday celebrations. Of course, if you look at where the word dog is used in the Bible in any way, like dogs are used in very bad ways throughout the whole Bible, so I guess maybe we shouldn't have dogs either. I don't know.
I am so sorry, but I have to stop. Okay, but only because it's 2:15 or 2:17 now. However, if you have other questions, if you want to write them down and leave them for me, I will pass them on. And Mike and Jenny and I were thinking maybe what we could do is, if you have more questions, he could like videotape himself answering. They could videotape themselves answering the questions.
I'll put it up on YouTube or something like that and answer any of your questions.
So if you have, do you want to write them down? Do you want to email them to me or something like that? We'll get them to them. So,
and if anyone wanted to actually like discuss it, had some issues they wanted to discuss or something, like I guess let her know, and like I can do a Skype chat, or I have Zoom. I can do Zoom and have people come in and we could have a discussion.
Yeah, because they work normally during the day, so they took time off of work to come. So that's the thing. And I told them when they came.
Somebody's house is dirty today.
An hour and 15 minutes is not going to be long enough, but we'll just do the best we can. So thank you all so much.
Thank you guys.